So back on the project we've got going here, which is to get Ansible working on these routers. What I've done is I've done some work in the background just to make sure that things are working as they should. And over on this network here, I've got a router here called Part2. What I'm going to do is just show you what I've done to enable Ansible to interact with this Part2 router. So over on the Ansible server here, I'm just going to show you where we are in the root. I'm just going to do you a list of what I've created here. You've got an Ansible config file. You've got a directory called host vars. You've got an inventory file, and you've got a test play YAML file. So let's just cat out the Ansible file. And what you've got is some settings which will override the Ansible config file that it normally looks at. So it will still see that file, but this is like an override, and this is perhaps one of the key files that you've got in there, which is my inventory, and you need to have that referenced in your config file. So whatever you call this relates to this file here. Okay, so let's just move on now and cat out the my inventory file. So here we've got a section where I'm defining that I've got a routers group, and in that group I'm putting parts 1. So eventually what I will do is extend this to list out all the different routers in this topology. So in the host vars now, I've got one file called part2.yaml. So in the inventory file, I specify part2, and then in the host vars, I specify the same host with a YAML extension. So what I do is now is just going to clear that, and I want to cat out the part2 YAML file. So I'm specifying the IP address. I'm also specifying that I've got a user and an SSH pass using the network CLI, its operating system, and this is for the enable command and the password for that. So that's a YAML file, and you would set that up, and you could also change all these commands. You can have a different user and you can have a different password, of course. So let's go back now. What I'm going to do is show you the test play file now. So here what you've got is how Ansible runs this play against this router. So this is the name, which is test ping. I'm going to ping parts2 being the host, so it will look in the inventory for that name, and then it will inspect the host vars parts2 YAML file for the details on how it can interact with it. gathering facts is false. The network is CLI, and we're going to do a task is a play within the playbook. So it plays this task, runs this task against that host. So the destination is 192.168.50.22, and really this just kind of prints an output on the screen. So we can now run this test play YAML file, and let's see what happens. Okay, it's now running the play. Whenever you see green, that means it's worked. It's pinging the command, and it's come back as OK. So that's a kind of an introduction on how you would get Ansible to start working with a host. What I want to do now is go through with you how to get the same command to run on a different router. At the moment it doesn't know about this, and although you can ping it, so you can ping it. However, Ansible doesn't know that that router exists. So if we have a look at this router now, which is this here, okay, so here we've got the interface up, and we do a show run. You'll see that we've got really basic configuration on here, nothing much really to talk about. But one of the key things is that Ansible uses SSH to inspect and interact with the router. So you need SSH access. So what I've got is a standard which I apply to the standard setup here. So here I'm just going to apply SSH. I'm going to configure the terminal. I'm going to add a user, give privileged rights to that user. It's going to be on the VTY line, and for SSH you need it to have a domain name and your crypto key. So you can kind of, all I'm going to do is pick that out. I'm going to copy that on the, get a bit full screen here. So back on the engineering ENG router here, all I'm going to do is copy that all in, and save it. Okay. So now we should be able to set up the Ansible server to be able to interact with this router as well. Okay. So first thing is the Ansible config file will be the same. the My Inventory will be different. We're adding a new host to this Ansible server. So if we now My Inventory, Part2, and we're also doing ENG. That's in. So if I cut out My Inventory now, you've got ENG under the routers group. What I'm going to do is have a look at the host files. Okay. I'm going to also need a Part2 YAML. So I'm going to copy Part2 YAML. I'm going to call it ENG. So if you list those, I've now got a YAML file ENG. It's not quite right yet, so let's just go into that. It's going to be a different password, IP address. So 192.168.77.34. All these are the same. We're going to come back and make this better. Obviously, put in something in clear text isn't quite right. So we're going to skip that part for the moment and come back to it later. Let's just save that. That's perfect. What we're going to do now is okay, we can now start to do another play for ENG. So let's copy that YAML file and we'll call this ENG play1. We'll nano ENG, and this becomes ENG. So it will use this host name in the inventory file and the host files, and the IP address is 77, I think 34. 7734, yes. Okay. Let's do it. So now what we should be able to do is Ansible Playbook, ENG. We should see a response from that. Okay, so we've got an interaction in Ansible to that router as well. So the next part, what I'm going to do is just make sure that I repeat this process in the other two routers, and we'll have a different playbook, hopefully, where it pings them all and you get a result back from Ansible. So I'm going to go and do that now, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so back on the Ansible server here. This is where it gets a lot more interesting, really. We've spent some time setting up our sort of variables and our files and our config areas, and we can start to interact with multiple routers now. So if I'm going to just list out what I've got here, I've created each file is a ping file instructing Ansible to ping that host. So if I go in and cat out the ng YAML file here, which is this host down at the bottom, I'm going to do a test ping to the ENG host. This is the IP address 7734.7734. So if I do a Ansible Playbook to the ENG YAML file, we should get a ping back. Okay, so we'll just list that out again. If I do a ping to Part2 over here, that pings. Okay, let's just have a look at what's happening here. It's pinging 192.168.27.10, and if I cat out the Part1, we specify the host here, specify the destination IP address, and that's the IP address that Ansible will use. So we've got all the hosts have their own files, but we don't really want to go into each file to test the ping. The idea is we configure Ansible to do ping on all the hosts. So I've got here a file called multi-ping. Let's just have a look at that file. What I'm instructing the this ping file to do is on the hosts, I'm specifying the routers group, and the destination is going to be the Ansible host. So this needs to be in quotations, and then you've got curly braces, 2 on one side, closing braces on the other side. That's referencing a variable, and what I want to do now is just go through the hosts that it's going to reference, and I'm going to go through the destination variable as well. So looking at the hosts, we're referencing the host vars, we're referencing the my inventory. So the routers is a section in the my inventory. Let's just cat that out. So here we have the routers group, all the routers in the group. That's this section here. If we look at the Ansible host variable, that is in the host vars. The hosts are referenced in the file, but here is the YAML file for each host. So if I pull out one of these and we cat out one of these files to Part2, we see that the Ansible host is the variable. So that's the variable that I'm referencing. So multiping.yaml referencing the routers in the My Inventory. The My Inventory will reference the files in the host vars, pulling out the variable Ansible host. So let's run this YAML file in the playbook as a playbook now. That's a playbook YAML file. So Ansible playbook multiping.yaml. Okay, so this is real time, and instead of having to type out all the IP addresses, it's pinged and come back with an OK command for all those different IP addresses. So we know that we have router connectivity. So let's take this a stage further now. We've managed to not only build a working Ansible file that pings each one individually, but we're now using variables to access routers in a group. And you could separate these groups. You could have just the parts group and have a different area just for parts and reference just the parts routers. So that's another key kind of element, is that you can put different routers and switches in different groups, reference them and run different playbooks on them. So what I've done is created another playbook, and this is called the store interface config. So what we want to do is we want to go and get the store and store the interface config of each of the routers. So normally what you would have to do is go into each router and do a show run and pull out the interface configs of each routers. So let's just have a look at this YAML file I've got set up here. So we'll just cut out the store config. So this is the start of the file, store config. I'm going to run, it's only one play, but there are 4 tasks. So let's just go through the hosts which I'm going to reference here is all of the routers in the routers group. The tasks are split into task 1, task 2, task 3 and task 4. Task 1 is to get the config from the device. This is a bit like typing in a command on the interface, and you're going to do a show running config, but we also just want the section interface. So you could change this iOS command to search for another part of the showing run config, and it would do the same thing. In the task 2, we are really referencing this result which comes out from that command, and we're going to print the output to the screen. This is an interesting kind of section here. if there isn't an outputs folder created, it creates one. And task 4 is write the output to a file and put it in the outputs folder which was referenced above. So it's a little bit more complex than the ping playbook, but it shows you how much you can do with a Ansible playbook to pull out particular data. So let's run that now. So Ansible playbook. Oh, just before I do that, I'm going to just do a list, and you'll notice here that I have not got a outputs folder. So an outputs folder doesn't exist if I list the contents of this area here. So Ansible playbook, store interface config. Okay, it's play 1, task 1. It's getting the config from the device right now. So it's going to each router and getting the config. Task 2 was printing out the output. And task 4, it's creating files in the outputs folder which we referenced. So if I now do an ls, you'll notice here that I've got an outputs folder. And if I go into the folder, I've got a list of text files here which weren't there a moment ago. And if I cat out gt.txt, from here I've got the interface of that router, interfaces of that router. So that really wraps up the introduction to Ansible playbooks and how it can be used to get the configurations of routers. Thank you.